Okay, what's going on, guys? One question I'm getting asked quite a lot is why is formation so important, especially this year? A lot of people don't know the formation choice that you make. It's much more important than it was in previous years. So, for example, let's say hypothetically speaking, in this example here, if you were to play, let's say, a 4-3-2-1 last year, you could make the formation defend in a 4-4-2, right? So you could basically alter it with instructions. Well, now with instructions, you can't alter. Well, there's no instructions anymore. There's roles now and focuses, but you can't alter the shape. So you can't have a player to come back in defense and make an extra midfield. So if you remember, like last year with a 3-5-2, I could make, for example, one of the strikers come back. You can't do that anymore. And the most important thing, especially when you're choosing a formation, is make sure you choose a formation for your defensive structure. Because unfortunately, in this iteration of FCA, hopefully in the future they will change it, but you can't choose your shape out of possession. It's really odd because you would think that would be the thing to do to choose a shape out of possession and choose a shape in possession. So if, for example, you use a 4-4-2, let's say, um, that will be the shape. So if you choose the 4-4-2 formation, that would be your defensive shape. Okay. Let's say, for example, you played your center mid as a half winger. Okay. As a half winger, they will end up playing in possession as a wide player. So effectively, you could argue you'll have something like this when you're attacking. But the defensive shape is they go back to their neutral position. So remember this key thing. Whatever formation you choose will be that neutral shape. So you're still going to see formations like the 4-4-2 second variation, or even the 4-2-2 or the 4-2-3-1. Now, for example, the 4-2-2, which I think will be a very, very good shape, is because you have two CDMs. Now, this is where the player choice is a bit problematic, okay? Because last year, for example, if you had Son, and you wanted to play Son, who's a left winger. I know he's a striker this year, but let's take last year's example of Son. He was a left winger, but you could move him to a striker inside the game. Well, then that player is going to lose their role. Same with, for example, last year, Llorente. I used to play Llorente, even though he's a centre mid or a right back, actually, natively inside the game. His secondary position is a centre mid. I want to play him as a CDM. Well, you can't do that this year. So, in fact, the limitations of what players you can use has been reduced significantly. So if your plan was to, for example, use a player, for example, as a centre mid in CDM, you can't do that. Remember, I've always told you this. If you watch my last few videos, always keep your back four and your two CDMs. Make sure they have the correct role. Do not play them out of position, because this is the key points, the key spine of your team and your key structure. If you want to see more information in regards to that, how roles work, I've got a video that explains every single focus, how every single role works and their movement. It's on my Patreon series, patreon.com/nilguides. If you don't get better after 1 month, refund your minus the nil guides guarantee. But that is the most important thing. And also subbing players on. People are saying to me, oh, Neil, okay, that's fine. What if I want to sub a player on? So, for example, you might see a player, for example, like Correa, and you're thinking, oh, can I play Correa in the Premier League? Well, you can sub them on as long as they go to the correct position. Okay, so if I put, for example, Correa, or let's say Vinicius Jr., right? If I had Vinicius Jr. as a substitute, if I put that player in striker, they are still going to be out of position, because Vinicius Jr. can only play that role that is a left wing or a right wing, for example. So it's very, very important that when you sub those players on, they have the correct roles. Now, should roles be a big determining factor? I would say the higher level player you are, the less of a factor it would have. Because if you're sitting there, you're an elite player, you're going to be triggering those movements manually. If you're like a Division 7 to Division 5 player, or you're new to the game, that is where you're going to find roles really will help you. For example, like the two CDMs, I would recommend always having at least the correct role in that position. But if you want to, for example, play, as an example, a striker in that position that's got very good defensive awareness, as an extreme example, a top tier player can do that because they can react in time. They know when to switch, when to move that player in position, whereas an average player would not. So that's what I would say. It kind of really takes into account what level you are. Now, I would still sub on, if I had Vinicius Jr. as a striker, I would still sub them on in striker. Let's say, for example, hypothetically, I packed Vinicius Jr. on the first day and I had a team of gold 83 rated players. I would probably still use Vinicius Jr. as inside forward, but I also might use him as a striker. I'm not saying you can't use a play out of role. I'm not saying that. I just think that, remember, the player movement, 40% is attributed to roles, and the remaining 60% would be things like you can argue the attack awareness, the defense awareness for someone that's defending, and stuff like that. It's only really the transition. So, for example, if you're going to be playing a right back, let's say, for example, you play centre mid, as I used example yesterday, as a half winger, and you're going to be playing your right back in possession as a false back. The transition from this to this and this to this, because there's no more work rates, that will purely depend on play styles, roles, should I say, the role plus pluses. That's what's important. So there's nothing wrong with using a player out of a role, but I would just say it does depend on what level you are. The better level you are, the better that player would perform. Now, in terms of also the choices of role plus pluses, look, there's so many different things this year. I've explained, for example, like a sweeper keeper, how you can play that play in a halfway line in a few different ways. When a game comes out, try those things out. I'll have a video on my channel explaining how the roles work, how each formation works as well. But what I'll do is I'd recommend experimentation. Although the formation and in fact, if anything, I think the tactical system has been limited this year. I actually much prefer the role system with the tactic system last year. That would be my perfect combination, but you can't do that. So what I would say is just experiment. I would say things like the false backs, they actually work as false backs. So that's where the game changes. It's really in possession where you can create these custom layouts. You know, you didn't hear this from me, but you could basically have two CDMs. They can drop back and make a back six. It shouldn't be in the game, in my opinion, but you can do that. Equally, for example, one of my favorite formations, for example, is the 4-5-1. And the reason why I like the 4-5-1 is basically you can actually end up playing with 6 players up front, having a 6 striker formation and playing the 2 centre mids as a false back, sorry, 2 left back and right back as centre mids as a false back, and almost emulate a 2-3-6 system, or you can even emulate a 2-3-5 system as you would in real life. So that's where the possibilities then get opened up. So these are just some things to bear in mind. I'll be uploading some new videos like this. I'll be uploading multiple times a day. So if you want to stay up to date and stay ahead of the game, make sure you check out my channel. And don't forget, if you do want to get better at FC, come to my Patreon series, patreon.com/NeilGuides. If you don't give after 1 month, we'll refund your money. That's a Neil Guides guarantee. And that is how sure we are you'll improve. That's one thing I wanted to say. So when you are building your squads, just take into account that formation. Formations like the 4-3-3, 4-2-2, the 4-4-2, especially formations with native CDMs. If you struggle to defend, choosing a base formation with native CDMs is more important than you think. The CDMs, they sit deeper and then the right place at the right time, especially to stop counterattacks. That would be my suggestion when you are trying to pick a formation. But I think that is pretty much it. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know what kind of other videos you want to see in terms of roles. Anything in particular you want to see, do let me know. I know some people have got some questions here about how the specific players work and stuff like that. We'll get onto that as well. But thanks for watching. Take it easy. Of course, I'll catch you in the next video. Peace out, guys.